Give me 1 or 2 minutes. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ahmadu wa nusalli ala rasulihi al-Kareem, amma ba'd. As promised, inshallah, today we will start our session with the great Sahabi Abu Ayyub Al-Ansari Radhi-Allahu anhu. Last week we finished off with the uncle Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib Radhi-Allahu ta'ala anhu. This session on Abu Ayyub Al-Ansari will probably continue in a series, since there's a lot of information about him in the history books and the biographical accounts, and also in the narrations in the hadith collections. And what I realized about Abu Ayyub Al-Ansari Radhi-Allahu anhu was that most of the hadith that he narrates, there's not a whole lot of hadith that he's narrated, but those which he has narrated, they're very famous hadith, well-known hadith that most Muslims know. For example, no Muslim should leave his brother for more than 3 days. فوق ثلاثة أيام. No Muslim should leave his brother for more than 3 days, meaning that they should not stop talking to each other for more than 3 days. Very famous hadith. It's narrated by Abu Ayyub Ansari Radhi-Allahu anhu. There's another hadith that's well known about the sunnah of khilal, that when you're performing the wudu, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would comb his beard with his hand. It's called khilal. That narration is also by Abu Ayyub Al-Ansari Radhi-Allahu anhu. There's another very famous narration. Many of us may not know it, but when we study fiqh, we always come up with this hadith, always comes up in the beginning of Kitab al-Tahara, the chapter on purification. And that is the hadith about when a person goes to the bathroom, لا تستقبل القبلة ولا تستدبر. That you should not be facing the qibla, and your back should also not be towards the qibla while you're attending the call of nature. Very famous hadith, and that hadith is taken by Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah as proof that when you attend the call of nature, then you should make sure that you should not be facing the qibla and your back should not be towards the qibla. So for those of us who are building new homes or new bathrooms in our old homes, we have to be careful about this, and we don't consider this many times, but this is something we need to be conscious of. Unfortunately, what I remember when I went for Umrah and Hajj is that in many of the hotels around Makkah Mukarramah, their bathrooms are oriented in such a way that many times, if you're attending the call of nature in the bathroom, you're facing exactly Ainul Qibla. Either your back or the front, exactly towards the Qibla. I don't want to give the example of the hotel that I was staying at, because there, when we did the whole checkup on it and evaluated it, it wasn't very difficult to find, because the door, we had a window that opened right up into the Kaaba, so it was very easy for us to figure it out, and it was directly facing. I don't know if that's purposely done. I doubt it. But how could somebody not know the hadith? And this is a famous hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, narrated by Abu Ayyub Ansari, and it's an authentic narration, rigorously authenticated hadith. Anyhow, So many of the famous ahadith are narrated by Abu Ayyub Al-Ansari, which is another reason why we should know Abu Ayyub Al-Ansari Radhi-Allahu anhu, right? As we know, his name is not Abu Ayyub Ansari. We may call it his name, but that was his name. That was his kunya, agnomen, which was common in Arab tradition, that there was a sign of respect and honor to give your son or daughter a kunya. Oftentimes, a person his kunya was named after the son or the daughter. And if they didn't have a son or daughter, it'd be named after somebody else. But they had a kunya because it was a sign of respect. Abu Ayyub Ansari Radhi-Allahu anhu, if his kunya is Abu Ayyub, that means he is the father of Abu Ayyub. But the problem is, I didn't find any narration about a son that he had by the name of Ayyub. Not a single narration about any son by the name of Ayyub. Wallahu alam. So, where his kunya comes from, how it originated, we don't know. Does anybody know what his name is though? So there are some Sahaba, we know their names, like Abu Bakr Siddiq, his name was Abdullah bin Abi Quhafa, right? We know his name because it's mentioned in some of the narrations. There's other Sahaba, like Abu Musa al-Ashari Radhi-Allahu anhu, his name is also mentioned in at least one narration. In Sunan al-Tirmidhi, there's a riwayah in which Abu Musa al-Ashari Radhi-Allahu anhu was sitting behind Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a camel, on his mount, and he said, Ya Abdullah ibn Qais. And the narration is by Abu Musa al-Ashari. So he's saying, the narration says, Anabi Musa al-Ashari, narrated from Abu Musa al-Ashari, and he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to me, Ya Abdullah ibn Qais. So we know that Abu Musa al-Ashari Radhi-Allahu anhu's name is Abdullah ibn Qais. But there's no such narration about Abu Ayyub Ansari where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called him by his name, or somebody mentioned it just in the midst of some other topic or discussion, not mentioned anywhere. But we know this is the barakah and hard work of our historians who collected the biographies of the Sahaba Ridwanullahi Majma'in, that they were able to trace his name. His name was a very common name amongst Arabs, and that was Khalid. His name was Khalid. Khalid bin Zayd al-Khazraji, from the tribe of Banu Khazraj. Khalid bin Zayd al-Khazraji. Now we also know Khalid bin Walid Radhi-Allahu anhu. Khalid bin Walid Radhi-Allahu anhu was from Makkah Mukarramah, and Abu Ayyub Ansari was from Medina Munawwara. That's why he's Al-Ansari, which tells us that Khalid was a very common name, because we have somebody from Makkah Mukarramah by the name of Khalid, and we had somebody in Medina Munawwara by the name of Khalid. And those were not times where we had nation states. You didn't have whole countries that were states, because there was not enough population for that. In those days, cities were whole states. So they had city-states. So Makkah Mukarramah could be considered a separate, quote-unquote, country. So if there's somebody from Makkah Mukarramah by the name of Khalid, and somebody from Medina Munawwara by the name of Khalid, that means Khalid is a very common name amongst the Arabs. There's a few other, many other tabi'i. I don't know of any other sahabi, and I'm sure there are other sahaba by the name of Khalid, but we know this much, that his name was fairly common. His full name, going through his nasab, is Khalid bin Zayd bin Kulayb bin Tha'laba al-Khazraji radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. There's two tribes of Medina Munawwara, the main tribes, and all other clans branched out from these two tribes of number one, Banu Aus, and number two, Banu Khazraj. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was related to Banu Khazraj through his father. He was related. And so that was one of the reasons, and we'll mention the narration on that, why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he made the hijrah, and everybody was grabbing the reins of his camel, wanting him to come and stay with them, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, leave it alone. Its path is decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's inspired by Allah, right? And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's camel, it settled down in front of the house of Ayyub Al-Ansari Radhi-Allahu anhu, and then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrated that he is from my family. In other words, even the camel knew the importance of keeping relations. We don't know that, but the camel knew it. Because it was the camel of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, the camel of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he did tawaf around the Kaaba, right? When he did tawaf around the Kaaba, he did it on his camel. Because everybody would be able to see him. Otherwise, nobody would be able to see him. And his camel was inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was a special camel. It was not your average camel you just pick off the camel farm in Arabian Peninsula. So it knew that this was not the place for it to go to the bathroom. This was not the place for it to go to the bathroom. So while it was in the haram, right, it never soiled the ground of the mataf. Because it was qaswa. The one who knew the importance of relations between family. The one who knew that this is the haram of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have to respect it. But there came a time, like 300 years ago, there was a famous scholar who was known to be a revivalist in the Arabian Peninsula. And he did a lot of work, but he was really strict on literal interpretation. And so when he came across that hadith about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being on a camel, he's like, let's go for it. So he got on his camel and he's doing tawaf. But obviously it just wasn't qaswa. It's a different camel. It's your average camel. It doesn't make that distinction between haram and non-haram. If I got to go to the bathroom, I got to go to the bathroom. And then it did soil the haram. So you can't follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in those things which are specific to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How would you know what is and what isn't? That's why we go to scholars. Because there's just so many narrations and so much information and so much knowledge, it's impossible to know everything. The scholars study this their whole lives. They will tell you, okay, this is a sunnah, this is not a sunnah. There's different types of sunnahs too. We'll go off the topic because another few hadith are coming to my mind which are not related to this. When did Khalid bin Zayd, Abu Ayyub Al-Ansari Radhi-Allahu anhu, accept Islam? When did he accept Islam? So you've heard of Bay'atul Aqaba, right? When did Bay'atul Aqaba take place? 2 years before the Hijrah. A group of Ansar came to perform the Hajj. First time, I believe it was 12, 13 people. I don't remember the exact number. Second time, it's known as Bay'atul Aqaba Al-Thaniya, the second pledge of Aqaba. 70 Sahaba from the Ansar, mixture of both Banu Aus and Banu Khazraj, came and secretly made bay'ah with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam near a mountain pass in Mina. And they did it secretly because they didn't want it to be seen making bay'ah with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Quraysh, and then Quraysh would cause them problems in the future. Because Quraysh was very powerful. They were the custodians of the haram. So they were respected, even revered. So nobody wanted to really get in bad terms with them. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they made bay'ah with him secretly near this place, mountain pass in Mina, and that's why it's called Al-Aqaba, the bay'ah of Aqaba. Aqaba means mountain pass. So the bay'ah that took place near the mountain pass in Mina, and there's the Ottomans, they built a masjid there in Mina that still exists near the Jamarat bridge, which has preserved the location of where the Bay'atul Aqaba actually took place. Subhanallah. So basically it means that he accepted Islam 2 years before the Hijrah. Whereas most of the Ansar accepted Islam after the Hijrah. This 70, they went back and they started converting more people, but a lot more accepted after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam finally made the hijrah. Of course, since he accepted Islam before the hijrah, that means one thing for sure, he's a veteran of the Battle of Badr. And you know what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about the Sahaba who took part in the Battle of Badr? What did he say? He said to Umar ibn al-Khattab, leave him alone, referring to Hatib bin Abi Balta radiallahu anhu in a hadith of Sayyid Bukhari. Leave him alone. He took part in the Battle of Badr. Who knows, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven him for everything, because he took part in the Battle of Badr. So there's that distinction that the people of the Sahaba of Badr have received because they took part in the Battle of Badr. What's the distinction that they receive? That who knows, Allah has forgiven them for everything. Meaning they can go and do whatever they want now. And they are the people of Jannah because of the sacrifice they made in the Battle of Badr. Sometimes one decision you make can become the biggest reward for you throughout your lifetime. That was one thing, the Battle of Badr. If they didn't do anything after that, that was enough for them. But of course, Abu Ayyub Ansari then took part in the Battle of Badr, and thereafter, in all the battles, there's not a single battle that he missed after that. So all the famous battles that you can think of, Uhud, Khaybar, Khandaq, Tabuk, all of them. All the battles that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in, he took part in all the ghazawat. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as you know, he established muwakhat. What is muwakhat? Brotherhood. Ties of brotherhood between the Sahaba, from the Muhajirun and the Ansar. And so, it's interesting to know that Abu Ayyub Ansari's ties were established with, of all Sahaba from the Muhajirun, Mus'ab ibn Umair Radhi-Allahu anhu. And of all the muwakhat that were established between the Muhajirun and Ansar, this was the oldest one. Why? Because Mus'ab ibn Umair, he was sent by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when the first group made bay'ah with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam 2 years before the hijrah. They said, we need a teacher who can teach us about Islam, who can tell us something about Islam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Mus'ab ibn Umair. So Mus'ab ibn Umair went 2 years before the hijrah. Even before everybody else had made the hijrah. He was already there. The first muhajir to make the hijrah to Medina Munawwara on the orders of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. On the orders of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had established muwakhat between him and Abu Ayyub Ansari radiyallahu anhu, it either could have been after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made the migration himself, or when he sent him out and said, listen, you're going to stay with Abu Ayyub Al-Ansari, which is most likely, which means that even 2 years before the hijrah, Mus'ab ibn Umair and Abu Ayyub Ansari, the muwakhat had already been established, whereas everybody else, their muwakhat was established after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina Munawwara. He had a daughter. His daughter's name, we're just going through a brief bio of his life and his relations, and just a brief description of him before we go into more detail. I always like to start off with things related to him and his family. So his daughter, he had a daughter named Amra binti Ayyub. Binti Abi Ayyub, sorry. Amra binti Abi Ayyub. She's also a Sahabiya of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who also made bay'ah with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's very interesting. She was married, Amra binti Abi Ayyub Ansari was married to a person by the name of Safwan. They both had a child. The child's name was Khalid, which basically means she named her son after her father. Khalid had a son, and they named him Ayyub. Okay. This is the grandson of who? This is the grandson, or great-grandson rather, of Abu Ayyub Ansari radhiyallahu anhu, and the grandson of his daughter. Okay. Now, if you listen to the riwayat where it mentions his nasab, because in the beginning of every narration, it always mentions the nasab, like his lineage, right? So it mentions Ayyub ibn Khalid ibn Abi Ayyub al-Ansari. Ayyub, the son of Khalid, the son of Abi Ayyub al-Ansari. He was not the son, Khalid was not the son of Abi Ayyub al-Ansari. He was the son of Safwan. He was the son of Khalid was the son of Safwan. Why is he called Khalid bin Abi Ayyub al-Ansari? He was Abu Ayyub al-Ansari Ridwan's daughter's son. But he's being attributed to who? His grandfather. The reason is because he would be better known that way. People would know who he is. Oh, this is the grandson of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu. Nobody knows Safwan. So this was a very common practice. That if somebody was known in your family, though they may not be your father, it may be your grandfather, it may not even be your paternal grandfather. And you know our ancestry goes by our paternal ancestry, not by our maternal. But even if there's somebody from your maternal family who's well known, sometimes you would take their name in your nasab, just not to improve your status, but just to show your affiliation. It was a sign of respect for you. So he was Ayyub ibn Khalid ibn Abi Ayyub Ansari, but he was not the son of Abu Ayyub Ansari. He was the grandson of Abu Ayyub Ansari. His father's name was Safwan, whose wife was Amra. That was his mother. So he mentions a narration, and we'll go through that narration right now, since there's only one narration narrated by him, in which he says that Rasulullah, he narrates from his father, who narrates from his grandfather, that Abu Ayyub Ansari radiyallahu anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you commit a sin, the word is wrong in this, so I'm not going to say what it is. There's a mistake. If you commit a sin, قُمْ فَتَوَضَّأ, stand up and perform wudu. فَأَحْسِنْ وُضُوءَكَ, and perform your wudu properly. ثُمَّ صَلِّ مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكَ, and then pray whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined for you to pray. You feel like praying 2, pray 2. You feel like praying 4, pray 4. In other words, when you commit a sin, follow it up with a good deed. And what would be a good deed that would be good to wipe out, erase your bad deed? Perform 2 rak'ahs, Salatul Tawbah. After performing wudu, not in haste, but properly, so that your sin can be erased in the record of your deeds. One more thing I want to read, and then inshallah we'll finish this off. Abu Ayyub Ansari had a slave. His name was Aflah. Aflah. Many of the narrations of Abu Ayyub Ansari come through either Aflah or his sons. And he had 3 sons. Muhammad ibn Aflah, Umar ibn Aflah, and Abdul Rahman ibn Aflah. And if you read about these 3 sons and the father, they're all called thiqatan fil hadith. Authentic narrators of hadith. Every single one of them. Thiqatan, thiqatan, thiqatan. They're all thiqah. Meaning dependable and reliable. Any hadith you hear from them, it's accepted. Sound. Umar ibn Kathir ibn Aflah, that's his grandson. Abdul Rahman ibn Aflah. I said there's 2, right? I said 3 sons, there's 2 sons. The other one is a grandson. So Umar ibn Kathir ibn Aflah, Abdul Rahman ibn Aflah, and Muhammad bin Aflah. And there's another one, Kathir ibn Aflah. So all of these, so one grandson, 3 sons, and the father, Aflah, all of them are authentic narrators. Even though they're not actually related to Abu Ayyub Ansari, then aside from the fact that they are his mawlas. Mawla, meaning freed slaves. The father was a freed slave, so all of them became the mawla of Abu Ayyub Ansari. They're all authentic narrators, have narrated, some of them have narrated numerous hadith, some have narrated barely any hadith, but they're still considered thiqah. In fact, one of them is even a faqih, a great jurist of his time. But the reason I'm pointing this out is because he also had a nephew. His nephew's name was Abu Sawra. So he had a brother. Abu Ayyub Ansari then had a brother. This brother, his name is not mentioned in the riwayat. But his brother's son's name was Abu Sawra. And Imam Bukhari says about his nephew, Munkarul Hadith. He's da'if. He's da'if. The reason I'm mentioning this, if you look at the comparison, here you have slave and the sons of slaves, the mawlas, they're all considered authentic and sound. And here you have the nephew, who's kin of Abu Ayyub Ansari, and he's da'if, which means that the filter system by which hadith were authenticated or considered da'if had nothing to do with your relationship. You were judged purely on what type of person you were. It didn't matter what family you came from, whether you were a son of a sahabi, or you were a slave, or a free slave, or a subject. It didn't matter. You were judged by who you were as a person. That's what the muhaddithun looked at. Character, conduct, taqwa. Here, his own nephew is declared and graded as da'if. And his own mawlas, who in Jahiliyyah times had no status, but look at the status that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them, that they're all considered authentic. Subhanallah. There's actually one very important narration in regards to his mawla, Aflah, his former slave. He loved him. Abu Ayyub Ansari loved Aflah a lot. He had been with him since he was young. And Aflah also loved Abu Ayyub Ansari Radhi-Allahu a lot. So there's a narration related to that, but we're going to go through that next week because we don't want to tire you out. So inshallah, we'll continue this next week. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين جزاكم الله أحسن الجزاء.